Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town Board work session for Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. Before we dive into our work session, I wanted to give just a brief overview of the latest information related to the coronavirus and the county and town response to that. So in terms of the latest statistics, and this is data that came out yesterday, May 4th, there are currently 30,097 positive cases in Westchester County, and just over 100,000 tests have been given in the county, which is a important statistic because that is close to 10% of the population now within Westchester County has been given a test. And we are running at about 30% positive tests overall. Here in Newcastle, we have 216 positive cases, and that data is actually as of today, May 5th. And we actually experienced a big jump in terms of the number of positive cases in Newcastle. However, this is a little bit of a false positive because this is really due to the state sort of clearing out a backlog of unknown addresses. They were able to associate those unknown addresses with addresses here in Newcastle, and that's why you see the sort of large overnight jump that we experienced. However, overall, of course, our numbers here in Newcastle, the numbers in Westchester County, and also the numbers in New York State continue to trend in the right direction as they have been now for several weeks. It's not a coincidence. The reason that we've been able to see this trend and to flatten this curve is directly as a result of the actions that have been taken by the state, by the county, and by your local government. And by each of you as individuals. So you are responsible for seeing the curve flattening. And so we want to say thank you to everyone in Newcastle for doing their part. As I mentioned earlier, tests, COVID-19 testing has become more prevalent. We've had over 100,000 county residents who have been tested. The county executive announced on Monday that every patient in every nursing home in Westchester County will be tested for COVID. Antibody testing is also being offered. It's being offered at the Westchester County Center right now for first responders. And we're all also hearing and reading about in the media antibody tests that are occurring at a variety of locations, including Caremount Medical Centers, urgent care locations, and other places throughout the county. Should you choose to be tested for antibodies, please remember the antibody tests do not tell you that you are immune to the virus. They do not give you an indication of when you can go back to work, and they do not tell you when you can be in contact with other people. So the purpose of the antibody test at this point is to determine whether you might be a potential plasma donor, and also to give the state information from a public health perspective about how prevalent the virus is. So regardless of the results that you receive, you must continue to adhere to the governor's executive orders with regard to social distancing. The governor has begun to talk about how the state will come off of pause, which is the executive order that requires social distancing and the shuttering of non-essential businesses. He has laid out plan by region for regional reopenings. The state is monitoring 4 sort of core factors which tell us when places can start to reopen. They're looking at new infections, which is measured by net hospitalizations and deaths by region. They're looking at healthcare capacity, which is measured by the total hospital and ICU beds that are available, as well as PPE stockpiles. They're looking at our diagnostic testing capacity, so whether the region has the ability to test effectively, as well as our contact tracing capacity, and making sure we have a sufficient number of contact tracers for the residents who live in each region. The governor's also laid out sort of a phased reopening approach, which talks about starting with phase 1, looking at construction, manufacturing, and some curbside pickup retail, working through a phase 4, which includes arts, recreation, and education. We will be able to start to reopen, but it will be slow, it will be gradual, and it will be regional. As we learn more about this, which we have these 3 times a week emergency check-in calls with the county meets regularly with the state, and then it filters to us that way. As we learn more, we will continue to publish this information in our new e-newsletter, and also communicate directly with local businesses, of course, to let them know when they are allowed to reopen. To that point, New York State is looking to hire contact tracers. You can go to the health department website, coronavirus.health.ny.gov, to get information about how you might get hired as a contact tracer. So this would be a great opportunity for anyone who's interested in looking at a job with the state. Last week, the town of Newcastle, along with the Chappaqua-Millwood Chamber of Commerce, hosted an online seminar called Coronavirus Stimulus Package Simplified. It was a panel of experts who answered questions and presented information for local small business owners to learn information about the economic assistance programs as well as technical assistance that's being offered by both the state and the county in response to COVID-19. That video is available. If you go to the Newcastle Community Media Center, you can find the video for that seminar and learn from the fabulous group of panelists that we had assembled there that day. Just a few more updates. I wanted to talk briefly about recreation. So with the onset of kind of this beautiful spring weather, everyone is naturally venturing back outdoors again to enjoy the sunshine and the fresh air, walk our dogs, and really kind of release the pressure and the stresses that we've all been feeling as a result of being quarantined for 8 weeks. We, as a town, really want people to be able to go outdoors, but we also must insist that people do it safely. We're following the lead and the guidance set by Westchester County, and we're also in close communication with our neighboring communities. As such, we're really trying to get people to voluntarily comply with social distancing guidelines. When we see a cluster of people, the Newcastle police officers will go over to them, they will address the situation, they will ask people to disband. When we see people who are too close together and are not wearing masks, our officers, again, will approach them and will remind them to wear masks when they're in public and they cannot maintain social distancing. But I want everybody to please keep in mind, this is a new way of being. It's a new way of living. Please, let's be patient with each other. We all occasionally forget to give 6 feet of space. We occasionally forget to pull up our masks when we see someone approaching us. Typically, a gentle correction is really all it takes to remind our neighbors of what's required. That said, if people are aggressive and are aggressively unwilling to follow the social distancing guidelines, we do have the capability to enforce that. And one of the ways in which we might do that would be also to talk about additional closures of parks or public spaces. We really don't want to have to take those steps. We all want to hang in there together. We all want to stay united in our collective efforts to thwart the virus. So please, please wear your masks, do the right thing, give 6 feet of social distance, avoid crowded areas. If you see a crowded parking lot at a park, choose a different park. And just remember, we're all in this together. So we can all practice patience, we can practice grace and empathy for our neighbors. And so the only other things I wanted to mention briefly, I know I'm talking for a long time. We are still in the middle of Newcastle Cleanup Week. We have distributed to over 70 households in the town of Newcastle, something like 170 different orange 30-gallon toter-sized bags for Cleanup Week for folks to be able to collect their litter that they see on the roadsides and in their neighborhoods. It's really a great way to be able to participate and to help your town continue to be a beautiful place to live and now to work. So if you're interested in joining us for Cleanup Week, the information will be in the e-newsletter. Please sign up. You can either pick up a bag at Town Hall or we will come drop one off at your doorstep. And the last but certainly not least, Census 2020 still ongoing. Please remember to participate in the census. It's very easy, takes less than 10 minutes. My2020census.gov is the website. Newcastle continues to be in the top 5 in terms of communities' response rates within Westchester County. We'd like to see us be #1. We believe we're #1. So please do your part. This really, especially in in this current crisis that we're in, it's absolutely essential that we count every resident of Westchester County and the town of Newcastle, because ultimately this is how funding gets distributed, is through the information that comes through the census. So please, please, please help us out, complete your census, and make sure that we all count. So that's it from me in terms of an update. Is there anybody on the town board who wants to say anything about the work that they've been doing? Okay. All right, so then the next thing on our agenda, the first thing on our agenda for this evening, is that we have an update coming from our town controller, Rob Deary. We have a full agenda for tonight, but this is our first sort of quarterly budget update from our town controller, Rob Deary. This town board made the decision that we wanted to have these quarterly updates coming from our town controller so that we could really stay on top of our financial situation throughout the year. And having already made that decision, it became even more imperative to have these regular check-ins with our town controller, since we're in the midst of this pandemic. And there's a lot to talk about in terms of both where we are right now, but also where we anticipate being as a result of revenue and expense updates in terms of our projections. And we're eager to start this conversation. So Rob, thank you very much for agreeing to join with us tonight.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to present the first quarter report. I'm going to break it up kind of in 2 sections tonight. I am going to talk about the first quarter, the results that we've seen so far, and then I'm going to talk about the second to the fourth quarters, kind of what we can expect to see for the rest of the year. The first quarter, typically not much happens in the first quarter. In terms of revenue, we haven't seen a lot of our revenue yet. Some of our major sources of revenue haven't been received. Sales tax and cable franchise fees come in May. Mortgage tax not until June. Most of our summer camp revenue comes in from March through May, and parking permits typically not until June. So most of our revenue has not come in so far. Some of our other sources, some of the recreation programs from the winter and the early spring, tax penalties, fines and forfeited bail, and our interest earnings, all of those were as expected. Under expenditures for the first quarter, we haven't again seen a whole lot that was unexpected. It's early in the year yet. We do have some good news in the highway fund. Due to a fairly mild winter during the first part of the year, snow removal expenses, contrary to the last couple years, were significantly below budget so far. So I kind of estimated we're about 60% complete with snow removal for the year, assuming 5 months, January, February, and March in early part of the year, and November, December at the end of the year. So for 60% complete with the year, salt purchases so far have accounted for about 22% of the budget, and snow overtime only about 9% of the budget. So we're definitely ahead of schedule there, which is good news. As far as the refuse and the water funds, nothing unintended either on the revenue or expenditure side. I will now take a little more time to review what I'm calling the financial outlook for the second through the fourth quarters. Obviously, we know that COVID-19 is having a significant effect on the overall economy in the country, as well as the county and the local finances. I'm first going to take a look at the revenue, and I've identified the revenue as the area that will most affect the town. Expenditure side, our town does not see a whole lot of additional expenditures, but it's going to be the revenue where we're going to feel the biggest hit. I am projecting most categories to either be at 50 or 75% of budgeted revenue. I'm kind of taking this as what I feel is a very pessimistic, almost worst case scenario to realistic. I really don't feel like any of these numbers I'm presenting are on the optimistic side. So I'm hoping they will not be worse than what I'm projecting. Property tax penalties, I expect that to be reduced because we have followed the county and we are eliminating penalties on a need base through July 15th. And if you don't qualify as a need base, we are reducing the penalties through that period of time for anybody else. So we expect a little drop off on the property tax penalties for the year. We still have a significant amount of money comes in from the penalties via liens, and we've also collected some of that money from the end of the school tax collection. So year to date, we're already at about 150,000 in penalties, and we do expect probably another 160,000 or more to come in. Probably the biggest source that will affect the town are county sales taxes. Obviously, with most of the economy shut down for the entire month of April and part of March and probably most of May at this point, trying to predict where we will be is going to be difficult. But my methodology here is I've assumed that we're going to reach about 100% of our budget for the first quarter. We really had no reduction in economic activity for most of the first quarter. January and February were still very strong. The county provides tax collection numbers, not exactly what they're distributing to us, but what they have collected. And those numbers through January and February were up about 40% over last year. We did factor that into the budget this year, but so I'm assuming 100% of the budget for the first quarter. The county was suggesting a drop off of, I believe, 20% in quarter two. I've taken a little more pessimistic view of that, and I'm assuming a 40% drop off, and then in quarter three, another 25%, in another 25% drop off in quarter four. So where we had $3.3 million budgeted, I'm projecting year-end budget, revised budget of about 2.55 million. So you see that's a pretty significant drop off. Commuter parking fees. This is another area we're expecting a little bit of a reduction. We are shifting our collection period. Typically, we renew those in June, and we see the revenue at that point in time. Right now, I believe the plan is to push those off until October. We're still hoping to collect. We're going to shift the entire parking permit season each year from October to October, and we expect to collect full year parking permit fees at that point in time. But I am expecting, I'm projecting about a 75% of what we would normally get. I just think that people probably, not everybody will be returning to the city and commuting, and I imagine there will probably be a lot less pleasure visits to the city as well.
So Rob, I'm going to pause right there just while you're on that point, because it's actually something I probably should have mentioned at the top of the call in terms of a policy shift. But I'm also, just mindful of if there are any questions from any town board members about what we're looking to do there. So what was recommended by Jill and by Rob here is to, originally the town board had decided to delay the application period from our typical June collection to a July collection. The idea here would be to shift it out again to then have the calendar year starting on November 1st. So we would still be looking to do a full calendar year, looking to ask people to sign up for the year, but the year now wouldn't start until November 1st. So essentially, just keeping the current sort of roster of parking passes and extending those passes for folks who currently have them.
how would that affect, how do you think that will affect people who want to cancel their parking permit and then get a, a rebate for the quote unquote unused portion? What, does anything become unused?
No, so actually what happens is that the way our current year worked, you needed to submit an application for last quarter refund by March 15th. So anything from March 15th to that next November 1st start date is basically just additional time that we're granting to people because we understand the state of uncertainty. And people just don't have it, can't wrap their head around. In September, maybe there'll be some normalcy, so that also buys everybody some time to push it off, let all the kids get settled, hopefully, in school in September. And then we'll, pass our school tax collection, which is, September 30th, and then give Christina and the clerk's office an opportunity to process in October for the November 1 start. Christina, any comments? I know we're losing our summer help. That's our only thing. Our summer interns used to be fabulous helpers on this. And
No, can't hear you, Christina.
can't hear you, Christina.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
So I know that Jill has really dove into this, and we're back and forth trying to figure out the best scenario because it's really not a good. There's so much that goes on in the clerk's office, and the parking is all consuming. My only comment is it was so wonderful to have the interns because you really need that labor to process all the applications. So pushing it forward, we're going to need to hire part-timers to help us. But it's just a really tough time, and people aren't parking at the train anyway. I don't think they've purchased them until the end of summer. Does that help? Anyway.
Mm.
So, and then I have the school taxes, we have the election, so it's just always something, and it really is. It's a big thing. We sell a lot of parking passes, and they're most of them are not online, and it requires copying, and some of the people have to walk through their applications, so it is time consuming, and I think that's what we were thinking was that's the only lull, if there is a lull. Does that make sense?
Sorry. Yeah. I know.
I had mentioned to Joe, I just didn't know if it's better. I don't know what people are they going to be looking. Are they thinking we're going to end in May? And are they so programmed because they're used to purchasing it to expire in May? Now we're shifting it, but I guess they have the year to figure that out. We'll start selling in November.
Yeah, we'll just market the heck out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really pleased with this solution that you and Jill and Rob came up with. I think it has the best potential of preserving that revenue stream for the town while also factoring in the workload and the available resources in your office to be able to help. And so I hear you that there's going to be a difference this year in terms of the staffing and the availability and not having the interns there. Nevertheless, I think, given where we are right now and the uncertainty around when businesses will reopen and when folks will start to commute back into the city, I think that this option is, like I said, is a good compromise. And so we'll just have to figure out how to make sure that you have the support that you need.
Right.
Thank you.
And one way we can kind of maximize that as well, I'm projecting about 75% of typical revenue or budgeted revenue. If we find that we're not selling as many permits to residents, we can also increase permits to non-residents, which are at a higher cost. So that may help us there too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Christina, why don't you speak on that?
Yeah, I had as Rob and Jill are mentioning, we kind of noodled this around quite a bit because we're getting calls saying I'm not going to renew and things like that. So we know that the enrollment will be down. Right now, the level that we sell to non-residents is 70 passes. We limit it to that. We charge them $1,300 versus a resident permit, which is $500. So if the board sees that we're not selling at the same level, they may want to consider opening it up to the non-residents for this year. And it doesn't, doing that doesn't grandfather them in or anything like that. Each year for the non-residents, it's a lottery system. So you're not bound to the.
Great.
Okay. Tied in with the commuter parking permits are also the parking meter revenue. I'm projecting that at 50% of the budget, and that may even be a little optimistic. We're already collected at $40,000, and that's really through 2.5 months because the middle of March we just dropped off completely. In order to reach 50% of our budget, we would have to get back to normal for the last quarter of the year, which is something that we possibly can do. So that's kind of a realistic number. Summer camps. At this point, I'm projecting 0 revenue. As I mentioned, this is a total worst case scenario. We have not made a decision on summer camps at all yet, but from my standpoint, I'm going to assume 0, and any more than 0 would be great. So in my projection, I've assumed 0. Other recreation programs, I'm assuming a total drop off of about 50% from budgeted revenue for the year. Hopefully we're still able to hold some of the programs towards the late summer and the fall programs and early winter programs, including basketball and flag football and those types of things, which are pretty big revenue producers. So we're hoping to have 50% of our budget. I think other rec programs, we brought in about $70,000 so far from other rec programs this year. Interest earnings, the interest rate is kind of tanked at the beginning of the year. We do have 2 investment accounts, Signature Bank and NY Class, that we're maintaining some interest earnings. For the year so far, we've got about $24,000, and that's kind of at the lowest amount of cash that we have now that we've collected cash from the property taxes. And before we have to make the county whole in October, this is usually when we make the bulk of the interest throughout the year in the summer. So I'm projecting a drop of about $20,000 versus the budget, but that's not a huge amount. Building permits. I'm assuming 75% of the budgeted revenue. Our building department is still working pretty strong right at the moment. Maybe not to the level it would have been if we were open, but they're still processing permits and doing inspections. So I'm assuming at this point, 75% of the budgeted revenue. Fines and forfeited bail. I'm dropping that to about 50%. I can imagine there's not very many tickets being written either by state police or local police at this point. We haven't had court in several weeks, so there's not a lot of money coming in there. So I'm dropping my estimate there to about 50% of the budget. We have brought in $71,000 so far this year in the first 3 months. So it's not unrealistic to expect 50% for the total year.
Does that take into consideration the change in the bail laws?
Yeah, the bail doesn't affect that. So the bail goes into a separate account that's not recognized as revenue. It's kind of an escrow, as you might say. So that's not projected in there at all. Mortgage tax is the next category. I have that budgeted about 75% of the revenue budget. We had dropped that number from 975, I think, last year down to 925 this year, kind of expecting that maybe the SALT deductions and kind of a little downward turn in the economy might bring that number down. We are hearing some reports from real estate agents that are somewhat optimistic that this that the pandemic might bring some people out of the city and the more densely populated areas into our town, which would help with the mortgage tax. So cautiously optimistic that we can achieve 75% of budgeted revenue. State aid, AIM, which accounts for $86,000 revenue for the town, I have that budgeted at 0 at this point. I know it was included in the New York State budget at the same numbers as last year, but I am aware that the state is going to see significant revenue shortfalls, and I would expect that that would be one of the first areas that would be cut. Our state aid for our road paving, the CHIPS funds, I'm also assuming at 0 at this point. Hopefully we'll get something, but again, from a pessimistic or worst case scenario, that's what I'm projecting. So
what his interactions were with other officials and whether or not that slowed down the administration's response even more overall to the coronavirus.
Caitlin Collins, appreciate it. Thanks to Caitlin. Joining us now is Juliet Kime, CNN National Security Analyst and former U.S. Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security, also Chief Political Correspondent Dana Bash and Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta. So Sanjay,
Someone have CNN on in their background really loudly.
On the face of it, it
Wow,
seems
can you turn that out?
surprising,
Wow.
given this is an ongoing pandemic that will continue through the summer and very likely, for until there's a vaccine or until enough people.
Well, can you mute everybody?
There we go.
all right.
I got very excited. I thought it was going to be like one of those ghost calls where you get,
You thought I was bringing a special guest?
our special guests were going to be CNN correspondents. It was we get very exciting in this budget presentation. Not that it wasn't already very exciting.
No, sorry, nothing so exciting. So just to wrap up my revenue projections for the year, if all of that holds, we're looking at a revenue deficit of about $2.8 million, which is pretty significant for the town. Fortunately, I see some offsets coming on the expenditure side. A lot of these activities that if the town is not running some of the activities to earn revenue, then we're not incurring some of the expenses. So I'll cover some of that at this point. The town is not really incurring a lot of expenses related to the COVID-19. We've done some additional cleaning, some environmental cleaning. We've purchased some supplies. At this point, it's about $35,000. I said $50,000. We might go a little bit over there. I am working with Mike Sicali, and he is going to include our current expenses in reimbursement request to FEMA. We'll see where that goes. I'm anticipating nothing, and if we get it, that would be great. Just to cover some of the potential expenditure offsets, a few of the positions we know that the town is not making any new hires for sure right now, and we're scrutinizing any current positions that leave and may need to be replaced. There's a caretaker position that opened, unfortunately, as a result of our caretaker passing away. We don't anticipate replacing that position at this point. There's a position open in the assessor's office. I'm not recommending we not rehire that position, but when we do, it's going to be at a lower rate than the prior person was making, so we'll see a little bit of savings there. We are looking at reducing some of the part-time staff, as we have discussed before. We could see some savings there. And I talked to the police chief. He's given me a very conservative estimate. The overtime so far for the year is very low for the police. He does expect that it will increase as our activities increase more. It will increase, but he's projecting we might be able to save as much as $27,000 in police overtime versus the budget. The recreation department if the camps aren't being run, we're going to have very minimal expenses related to that. We won't be hiring the part-time staff, the travel camp expenses, the baseball games and the amusement parks and water parks and those types of things. We won't be paying for that either. So we're expecting savings there. The art center, the instructors, if we're running reduced programs there, we will have less of a need for the art instructors. And the co-sponsor programs, which are the camps that we bring in, again, if we don't have revenue coming in, that means we're not paying for those programs. These are outside vendors that we're paying. I did highlight a couple areas that I identified as discretionary funding. These were budget line items that the town board has full discretion over. There's a line titled Town Board Consulting and Master Plan Consulting. Each of those are budgeted at $50,000. If the board chooses, they can reduce that amount or not spend it at all. Those would provide savings. There's also a Town Board Special Projects line, currently about $2,100.
Rob, can you just give some examples of what kinds of things have historically been paid from those discretionary funding lines?
So typically, not a lot, to be honest with you. We've included those budget lines at the request of board members in prior years, and we really have not taken advantage of them. I believe one year we paid for the one of the Minkle Dam studies out of that line. Mm-hmm. And those two lines, they weren't used last year. So those are some, like I say, I think at the board's discretion, those can be reduced. The Town Board Special Projects line typically is used. It's budgeted at $25,000. Those are just a variety of different things that the board chooses. A lot of the expenditures for the electronic sign, for example, in the past were charged there. Those were a lot of some of the public relations stuff, the magnets and some of the signs that you see around town have been charged there. Those are some of the things that were charged to those.
I just wanted to add regarding the consulting. Mm-hmm. I believe we had spoken about the rec master plan for this year. That was going to be coming out of those funds. Right. We are doing some of the trail work in-house this summer. So again, with our reduced staffing, some of the base studies that we were planning on doing for the rec master plan are taking us a little bit longer. So that may not be this year's expenditure. It may be next year's, but board should just be aware.
Thanks.
Okay, one of the last items under the general fund is the contingency line. We budget $150,000 each year. Certainly we'll need that this year. Moving on to the highway fund, as I mentioned earlier, we had very light amount of snowstorms and overtime and salt and those types of expenses early in the year. We look to have a savings of probably about $200,000, and the estimates that I've even put in are kind of over what I even think we might have for the end of the year. So we may find a savings of about $200,000 there. And we talked earlier, but I'll mention again the possible reduction of road paving. We did increase it this year over last year. We're up to over $1.1 million. My recommendation at this point would be to reduce that to $900,000. The difference between those two numbers are the CHIPS funds that I'm not confident about at this point. So we can pave less than that, but I wouldn't recommend paving any more than that at this point. Ivy, I know we talked before, and did you want to mention now what might be an offset to the reduction?
Yeah, I think that, I would just say that if we do need to reduce the road paving budget by the $200 some odd thousand that we get from the state for the CHIPS funding, if that does not come through as state aid to the municipality, I think we would be talking about increasing our road paving in the next calendar year. So this would not be a permanent setback, but we'd be looking for creative ways to do it at the next possible juncture.
So we had a shortfall in the revenue of 2.8 million. I see some expense savings of about 1.2 million. Total net estimated deficit for the general and highway funds of about 1.6 million based on what I see here. We talked earlier, fortunately the town is in a very good position. The financial statements haven't been released yet, but we're projecting about $8.2 million worth of undesignated fund balance that we will have that would be able to cover any of these shortfalls. Typically, these are considered rainy day funds, and I think we all consider that it's raining at this point. So in spite of the fact that the town is facing some difficulties, and the town management will continue to do everything we can to reduce costs, look at any cost savings that we can find. I think the town is in a fortunate position to be able to weather this storm.
So I think we're in the fortunate position to be able to weather the storm, but as you just said, Rob, I think it's also imperative upon us as a municipality to take advantage of the opportunity afforded to us by this crisis to really think sort of on a line by line, in a sort of line by line way about our budget for our municipality and what that's going to look like going forward. So, you know, we have a sense of what our, you know, revenue and expense projections are going to look like for this year. And I think this is fantastic, and it's really great information for us. And it's also comforting to understand where we are right now. But I don't think that we should sit back. I mean, I really think it's incumbent upon us to, you know, rebuild our budget, as I said, on sort of a line by line, in sort of a line by line way, taking more of a zero-based type approach to looking at the functions that we provide, the revenues that we generate, and then particularly the expenses that we have, because to the extent that we are able to you know, hold taxes flat for people in this municipality this year, I think that's a challenge that we have to be able to rise to.
I agree, and we're definitely doing that. Both Jill and I have started to look at the budget for next year. It's actually not that far off. We begin the process in July, so yeah. It's really not too early to start doing that. But we are looking at really anywhere we can save, and we do take a line-by-line approach to the budget. We're trying to look for those bigger chunks, but maybe also the smaller chunks wherever we can find it. You know, the town has had some really fortunate news with both health insurance over the last few years. Our membership in MEPCO has allowed us to stay significantly below night ship rates, which is a real benefit for the town. And our performance as a self-insured, our performance has been strong, and it continues to be strong. It was very strong in 2019, and the first part of 2020 has been strong. Workers' compensation, we continue to reduce costs there. Should have mentioned this in the presentation, but it was late. I just got it last week. We got our dividend check from State Insurance Fund for workers' compensation. It was about $50,000 more than budgeted for the year. So I think it was $123,000. So we continue to save money and also increase our. Did you have a comment, Jill?
No, fabulous.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Unbelievable. It's really great.
So, looking forward to the budget, those are the types of things that the town is looking at, and those help us. We're going to look at vehicle replacements, see what is absolutely necessary, what can be pushed off for future years, kind of maximize that type of expenditure as well. So just in closing, I went through the general and highway fund. I just wanted to make a couple comments. on the other funds. I didn't touch on them before. Refuse and recycling and the water fund, those are the two other major funds. I don't see that those would be impacted significantly by the economic conditions. The refuse and recycling fund, the majority of the revenue coming in there comes from the tax base. There are very few sources of revenue. There's some sales of mulch, which we're beginning again, and collection of yard waste and those types of things, but they don't account for a large portion of the budget. And the water fund, it's consumption driven, so it's not really subject to the downturn in the economy. In fact, we probably will see an increase in consumption over the end of the first and the second quarter as more people are in town and not going to work. They're in their houses and probably using more water. So we will probably see that revenue source will probably stay stable. So overall, just to wrap it up again, I mentioned that the town has a strong fund balance that we're carrying over, and we're in decent shape. We're in better shape than others, I believe.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate your taking the time to walk us through that, and having your sort of conservative and thoughtful approach to budgeting. Really, I feel like has been like I said, a source of comfort and reassurance to me, and I'm sure to the entire town board and residents of our community as well. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Before we let Rob go, eat dinner or whatever he'd like to do this evening, does anybody have any questions for him?
Thank you so much, Rob.
Well, I'm going to ask him to stick around for at least two more items, just so in case the board has any questions.
I tried to get you dinner.
Yeah.
I can smell it.
Overrated. The next item on the agenda is the request for authorization to purchase a wood chipper. So in light of the last storms that we've had, the wind storms, and there's been tremendous cleanup, one of the things that DPW uses on a regular basis is their wood chipper. Our wood chipper has seen better days. I'm not sure it's actually operational anymore. There's been a request to purchase a new one for $58,000. The board will notice in the memo from Bart Carey, he speaks of the fact that there actually was funds left over from a capital project that was set up for the purchase of a roadside mower that came in under budget. So that's $34,000, and Bart's also suggesting borrowing or just allocating $25,000 from the SALT budget to cover the remainder of that. So we should be able to cover it, even though it was not a budgeted expense.
Yeah, and I factored that into my projection for SALT.
You did. I was wondering if you did or not. Thank you. That's great. Okay.
So, Jill, is it? I understand what you just said, but we don't have like our wood chipper. I know you said you're not sure if it's working.
I'm not sure it's operational anymore. So in other words,
I'd love to know if it is or not. Because if they can get one more season out of it, we're considering just what Rob said. It would be great to try to save money wherever we can. But, if it could last another year, but otherwise I'm okay with it.
So Bart's memo has that there are two wood chippers that we have, that they need to have two operational, that the 1995 model is not operational. And
it's not working.
One model
identified in the capital budget for a replacement. I see that, yes.
Yeah. So the capital funds have to be used. So that $34,000 that was remaining from the roadside mower, it has to be used on a related expense. So we would need to spend it on something like that. And so it is going to hit the operating budget for $25,000, but that is an area that we'll be saving on.
Yeah. The one that's being replaced is from 1995, 25 years old. So I'm really very comfortable getting a safer, newer model. speaking of those workers' comp savings. Okay. The next is the request for the employment cost index increase. This is part of the SUEZ actual contractual obligations that the town has, but it needs town board approval to come into effect, even though we are contractually bound by it. So, let's just see. The increase that Jerry was speaking about is 2.7%. It's unfortunate for us because it's based on December's numbers. So December 19. We will get the benefit of this economic downturn in the next one, which will be December 2020. But unfortunately, we're bound by that ECI index. That's what the contract's bound to. So the next is the recreation fee schedule that Nick had an opportunity to speak with Ike about. And I don't know if the board has had an opportunity to look at it or not, but it really does seem like it's been cleaned up significantly from the first time we've seen it.
Agreed.
Yeah. Are there any questions or comments about what that looks like now?
No, so you're looking to us to adopt this fee schedule, and, you know.
Right.
I mean, I think
Yeah,
we understand that that it's new, and that if we have to make additional changes or clarifications, we'll do so.
Right. Okay. Next is the payment of claims, and then adoption of minutes. And then we've got 2 authorizations to ask the board about. One is the Brooke Culvert replacement improvement. It's authorization to issue the bid. If the board recalls, last year, Jeremy had a friend who commented that when they walked over the culvert from the front parking lot to the back parking lot, they could see straight down to the water underneath. Mm-hmm. We realized that we need to replace the culvert. We have been we've been working diligently to take and prepare the bid documents. They're finally prepared. We had a meeting with Con Ed virtually on Friday to remind them that they need to get their work done in order for us to proceed with this. That will be a continuing conversation, but we're ready to proceed. And we'd like the board's authorization to be able to issue the bid in this project. The next request is an authorization to approve the RFP for engineering services for the Millwood recreation field improvements. As the board is aware, we were awarded a substantial SAM grant for lights at the Millwood recreation field. In order to complete that project, we need engineering drawings for exactly where the electrical conduits go and site work on the property. So this would be to issue the RFP for those engineering services so they could actually draw up the plans so we can go out to bid and get the work done in a timely manner so we can get that field up and going. People are really going to love those sites. Okay. And basically I've got some proposed actions, but that's where we are. Any questions on anything?
I just want to comment on the payment of claims. If anybody saw that, it's a big one this time. It's over $4 million. And I know Diana had a little note at the bottom. I'm not sure if anybody saw it, that there were a couple of really big checks in there. The 2 fire departments, Millwood and Newcastle.
Mm-hmm.
Those accounted for over $3 million. I think we paid 3 months of water to the New York City Water Board, and there was health insurance and the NCCMC monthly. So just if you guys saw, you were used to, I think the check run last week was like 150,000 and then it jumped to like 4.2 million this week. So, so that's.
Yeah, so just so everyone is aware, we collect town taxes that include special districts. So we collect for the fire departments, and this is our disbursement of the monies that we've collected to them. It comes out, it looks like we're paying bills, but we're not. We're just, this is the way we allocate funds that we've collected for them. It was always their money. It just looks deceiving when you see it in a check. Okay. All right, Christina, who's going to do the, let's see, we've got our proposed actions.
Yeah, we have, actually, it's just, I have just the one page of, the one document with the resolutions. I emailed tonight, they were updated. So the first one is the payment of claims. And
You want me to go?
Oh, Lisa, all right.
Sure.
All you, Lisa, all
I
you.
was all
Yeah,
prepared to
right
call
here.
on Lauren.
Okay, the payment of claims, the amount of $4,242,621.83 listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detail voucher detail report, each prepared on May 5th, 2020. Checks will be issued and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, May 6th, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, I shouldn't have volunteered. Okay, this is an authorization for payment of a refund in conjunction with a settlement of a 2019 tax certiorari proceeding in the matter of Roberta versus the town of Newcastle. Whereas a consent judgment was already entered and served upon the town of Newcastle on March 2020, a date after which town and county taxes on the subject parcel had already been levied. And whereas the reduced assessment was not able to be utilized for the purposes of that tax levy, and the settlement was not able to be effectuated through the prospective levy of taxes based upon the reduced assessment. So to fix all that, now therefore be it resolved that the town board authorizes town staff to undertake those steps necessary to process and pay a $383.50 tax refund in accordance with the terms of the aforementioned consent judgment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who else can go if they want to?
I can go. Unless, Jason, you want it? All right. I move to authorize the purchase of one model year 2020 Bandit Intimidator 18 XP wood chipper from Westchester Tractor, Inc., 60 International Boulevard, Brewster, New York, 10509, for a total purchase price of $58,707.64.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize issuing a request for proposals for consulting engineering services for the Millwood Park Lighting Improvement Project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This is Tricia Brooke.
Yeah, I texted you, Jill. I wasn't sure if you wanted that tonight too. It wasn't on the resolutions.
Oh, yes, if we could. It's going out tomorrow. I think it may already be on BidNet.
What?
yeah.
Anyone want to take that
It
on?
would just,
Sorry,
So is this a motion here?
yeah, we were.
yeah, so it would just
Right,
be
a
a
motion
motion
open.
to, I'm sorry, Nick, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Joe, you got it.
No, just going to ask for a motion to authorize the issuance of a bid for the Tertia Brook Culvert replacement improvements.
Second. Oh, so moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Perfect. All right. Getting these bids out of here. Okay, great. Thank you all. That's all I have. Oh, Ivy, did you want to make an announcement about the Memorial Day Parade?
Why don't you go ahead and make that announcement? After careful consideration and in light of the ongoing New York state of pause and in light of the stated order in which we will come off of pause, the town of Newcastle, in consultation with our Memorial Day committee, has made the difficult but inevitable decision to not have our Memorial Day parade this year. Our Memorial Day committee, which are the folks who have been entrusted and do a fabulous job every year of planning the parade and the subsequent event that we have in Memorial Circle down at the train station, are looking into alternate ways of making a special and memorable day for those who serve. It's obviously a loss that we'll all feel because it's a day of great community spirit and something that I and everybody really looks forward to. But again, we are in this together. We will find ways to remember and honor those who served and lost their lives in the military, as well as those who are serving and putting their lives on the line today as we're going through this current crisis. So we will find ways of remembering and honoring those folks. We know that there's many creative individuals in this town who we can look to continue to provide us with those sort of alternate ideas and options. And so it's a sad moment, but we know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and there are more happy celebrations for all of us ahead. Bill, did I get it right?
Exactly the way I would have put it.
All right, so
Thank you.
we move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Perfect. Thank you all.
And now, if you can stop recording.